Um, yeah,
It's funny because no, I've actually come around on that myself. So sure, that's a good talking point.
me and Francisco, we chopped it up a lot about your video that we equate to the dollar bill video. We always say we're gonna make a video and it mimics your video. I was telling him about it. He's not a Swedenborgian. He grew up a Catholic. He's not
Well, I
a
won't hold that
religious.
against him.
He's not. He's not a religious man, but he's a a good spiritual brother. You know what I'm saying? You good?
Yeah, I'm going over my intro.
Oh, my man.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I knew him since he was a little kid, man. To see him do all of this shit makes me so happy, bro. Cause I ride his coattails, and get to guest host. He does everything else, the editing, the like all the stuff you do.
Yeah. You're doing the easy part.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm lucky, man.
Smart. I need to be more like you.
Oh man, now you need a Francisco. Yeah, I'm sure you're not gonna find one.
Who,
He's
me?
one of a kind.
Who, talk about it? Talk about it with Franjez. Today we have two special guests. Returning co-host Michael Muqattash. And today's guest leads worship services, church camps, spiritual development classes, Bible study classes, performs weddings, pastoral counseling. The list goes on. Todd Beiswenger.
Yeah, my man
Wow,
Todd.
you made me sound really good.
I hope you're as good as your credentials. It sounds amazing.
I tell you what, and you forgot to include spiritual influencer.
Woo!
Doesn't that
YouTuber.
sound good?
It sounds so good. I would love an explanation. What does that even mean?
Brian, you have the game.
Well, these days you go on social media, somebody says they're an influencer. And a few years ago, I started doing some YouTube videos. And this year I've expanded into Instagram Reels and TikToks and whatnot. And so I thought, this whole title of Reverend sounds so antiquated. I need a new title. I need to update my title. And I decided spiritual influencer.
I like it. I like it.
That's where I'm going.
I like it. At first, it sounds like you're influencing spirituality on people. Is that a way of looking at it?
Yeah, that's right.
I like it. Before we get too deep, let's start from the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born on a Air Force base in Fort Worth, Texas. And then I grew up outside of Philadelphia. My as you would guess, my dad flew for the Air Force. He was flying cargo planes, and then he had an opportunity to move to Philadelphia. So we moved there when I was little, and I spent most of my growing up there.
Oh, Philly.
Yeah,
Tough place.
yeah. Let's talk about Philly. When was the transition there?
I think Dad moved there when we were 76, somewhere around there. So I was tiny, and Dad's still there. It's basically, I don't know how fast you want to get deep on subjects here, but like my dad was raised by parents. One, his dad was Catholic, his mother was Protestant. He was really interested in the Book of Revelation. He thought that was fascinating. Wanted to figure out what it meant. His sister finds this book in the library called Apocalypse Revealed. Dad sees it, thinks it's stupid, and does nothing with it. But a few years later, he kind of comes back to it and says, actually, no, this is really good. And it's written by Emanuel Swedenborg from the 1800s, 1700s, 18th century. And Dad gets so excited about the stuff that he decides to move to Philly, where there's a whole hub of Swedenborg people going, and there's a little community and church and the whole thing. So he moves us up there, and he just transfers his Air Force work to McGuire Air Force Base over in New Jersey. So I grew up in this little Swedenborg community for most of my life.
How old
and
were
that's
you?
how I ended up in Philly.
How old were you?
I was like 1, 2, something like that.
Oh, wow. So,
like, I don't even remember Texas, but I have a birth certificate. It says born in Texas, but I don't remember it.
you're a Philly guy.
Yeah. I lived there till 2012. So 30 years or so, 30 some years.
And what
so
was the
Philly's
reason?
great.
What was the reason for the move out of Philly?
Well, what ends up happening is, so I graduated from university. I'm selling race car parts for 10 years. We're big into the drag racing industry. And then had this calling on my life to be a pastor for the church. And right as I'm finishing my training to graduate, there's an opening for a church in Sydney. We're just south of Sydney, Australia. And I said to my wife, I was like, hey, you want to go to Australia? She's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So I put my name in for the job, and they said yes, and we've been here ever since. It's been a heck of an adventure.
When you say calling, what do you mean? Was it a spiritual calling?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been trying to think how much I want to go into all this, but like, I think it might be useful to hear how I got into the church myself, because even though I was raised around it, I didn't really, embrace it as my own, right? It was something I'd grown up around, but, it wasn't really mine. But my kind of story is that in 2005, my mother passed away, and we were tight, and it was hard on me. And I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but like with my mom, she always thought I was a good boy, and I tried my best to uphold that, at least on an appearance level, even if I knew the stuff inside wasn't so good. And after she passed, I had this weird kind of sense of like, crap. She's on the other side, and she'll be able to maybe see what a jerk I really am, and all the bad stuff that goes on inside my head that, I've never let anybody in on. And in particular, at the time, I was deeply involved in watching porn and stuff like that. It's just like, I just knew that was not who I wanted to be even. And so I thought, I need to make some change. And I did various things to distract myself, to, go into the gym or learning different hobbies and stuff like that. And it wasn't getting me anywhere. I just felt like I was still in this negative, mind space. And what ends up happening is I found that as I'm just going through my mind of, how do I get to be a better person? This little voice inside my head is like of a minister from 20 years prior says, read the word, read the scriptures. And I was so burnt out of trying, and I was just desperate to be free of all this negative talk in my head, that I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. I didn't believe reading the scripture was going to do anything, but I'm like, what the heck? I gave it a shot. And I did. So I would every day before bed, I'd read a chapter. And then I just noticed that in a month, my headspace was totally different. And like, we talk about freedom in the world as being able to do what you want, right? Oh, I'm free to go out and drive my car. I'm free to go set up a business. I'm free to go do whatever. And what I learned is that freedom is much, it's not that. Freedom is being able to say no to something, right? Freedom is, hey, here's a donut, right? You really love donuts. Here's a donut, but you have the ability to say, nah, I'm good. Or, in a case like mine, it's like, oh, here's a Playboy magazine, and the ability to say, nah, not interested right now. I got other stuff to do. That was real freedom. It wasn't that something was put in front of me. Oh, I have to do this. I have to watch. I have to look at all this stuff. So it was a real switch in my mind of what freedom was. And when I saw what Scripture was doing for me, giving me real freedom, I became super interested. So I started studying it, and I wanted to know what it meant. And that's where Swedenborg comes in, because he explains basically a personal meaning. He's like, look, if you look at all these stories, they have application to your life. This is the Bible is this big metaphor for your life. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And I could see myself in all these stories. And not only was it showing what I had done, but it was clearly pointing to a picture of where I was headed if I didn't start doing things differently. So that kind of, once I got so invested in it and seeing the change for me, it's a long answer for how the calling came about. The calling was like, okay, hey, if you really benefited from this, other people would too. Somebody else is out there looking for this story too. Somebody else needs that encouragement to approach Scripture. Somebody else needs these explanations, because they're, doesn't have to be porn, right? It can be, drugs, alcohol, we get addicted to all sorts of things, success, money, right? And I thought, well, all right, I'll crack at it. And I don't know, I'll pause here for a second, because I don't want this to be a one-sided conversation, but I can talk for the whole 2 hours if you want.
No, that was incredible, because you hit like my 5 first topics. I wanted to get to know how you really came about it, and that was a perfect way of just letting us see it step from step. It started off with your father, and then it took you to see your own enlightenment in your adulthood. So you've been through this your whole life, but it took your adulthood, something in your adulthood for it to click. That's beautiful.
That's right. Yeah, look, it's weird. Like when I was in my 20s, probably like early 20s, I'd been around the Swedenborg thing all my life, and I didn't have anything against it, but I was tired of it. I felt like I'd just been, indoctrinated a bit, and I was like, not that I don't believe, but I'm stepping away. I went to school out of state, got my marketing degree, got into my career, and I never had any animosity towards the church and whatnot. It really wasn't until I had this, real spiritual struggle that the teachings of the church became mine. It's like, no, I believe this for me, regardless of whatever my dad or anybody else thinks. No, I see the value in myself. And that's what I'm trying to help other people do, is make it theirs, because it doesn't matter what I tell them. All that matters is, do they take it on for themselves? So I'm just trying to help people see the relevance and applicability to their own life.
How do you help people? Do you help people that come to you for help, or do you find yourself trying to help people that don't even want it? Because we can always see somebody that can use the help, and it's hard to really help those people, because people only receive help when they want it, when they're open to it, when they see the problem, when they want the help.
Yeah. Oh, look, it happens both ways. There are some people who show up at my door, the office door, church door, whatever, and they're wanting a conversation. We go out and do coffee, or sometimes it's a Zoom call. I do that kind of work, and those people know they need some help, and that's the easy one, right? Because they know they need something. With all the YouTube and social media stuff, that's just throwing the seed out there and hoping it lands on some fertile ground, and a lot of it isn't. There are a lot of people who just, they're where I was 20 years ago. They're so immersed in their work and their life, and and just paying bills and keeping the wheels turning of life, that they haven't had the ability to stop and go, how do I actually become happy, right? Because we think happiness is getting the stuff, or getting a husband or wife. There are things that we think make us happy, and then this is why the midlife crisis happens, right? Because you go, wait a second, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm not happy. This dream isn't real. How do I've got to reevaluate my priorities. And that to me is what the church, that's what religion is really about. It's about resetting priorities. So how do you help the people who don't want to be helped? You can't. You can't help them if they don't want to. And they have to realize that there's something wrong in their life. I mean, that was my story. I had to realize, hey, man, you're not who you say you are. You're not who you pretend to be, and realizing that needed to change. So you want to hear?
I came across this amazing quote recently. The people who need it the most want it the least. And the people who want it the most need it the least. And that's exactly the same situation. People that don't even realize it, they're the ones that need it. It's tough.
Yeah.
Very tough.
Yeah. No, that's true.
So Swedenborg, I only read one of his books. What was it? Heaven and Hell? What is it called?
Yeah, Heaven and Hell, the New Century Edition.
That one. That's a great book because I've never been into religion. I wasn't really a believer. I'm more of the person that needs like a little proof, a little something extra. So I've always been hesitant on believing, and that book actually kind of helped balance out my hesitation and what the Bible is about. I feel like it gave me like a little common ground on it. So
okay,
correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not too knowledgeable with Swedenborg, but he had hallucinations, right? Where he can tap into the spiritual world or something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it hallucinations, but he could see into the spiritual world is what his claim was.
And that's just to clarify, that's a Christian. It's a Christian religion.
Yeah. So Swedenborg was raised in the Lutheran tradition. So his father was like a Lutheran bishop or something like that, high up in the Lutheran ranks. And so at some point, so Swedenborg's got this whole life where he goes through his youth and early adulthood. He's a scientist. He's a hardcore. He's like a Leonardo da Vinci of Sweden, right? One of these guys who knows everything about everything. Math, science, poetry, mining, it's crazy how smart the guy was. And you can actually Google him, Swedenborg's IQ. And it's like, depending on the source, people have him ranked somewhere usually in the top 20 of all time greatest minds. So the guy's not stupid, right? He's brilliant. And in his mid 50s, he has this encounter where God comes to him and says, basically, you've got a job to do. You've got a job to do, and you're going to write down what I tell you to. And so he does. He spends the next 30 years of his life.
We're good.
Spends the next 30 years of his life writing down 35 volumes of books. Heaven and Hell is definitely the most popular and well-known one. And I think a lot of people like it because it presents a kind of a rational view of an afterlife. It's not this, oh, well, you were part of this religion, so therefore you go to heaven. Oh, you didn't believe the right things? Pull the trap door, down you go. Swedenborg presents a reasonable way that the afterlife would be. So
how is that? Is there a government, and according to Swedenborgianism or the New Church, would they say there's a devil in hell and a God in heaven?
Well, Swedenborg's view is that there is a God in heaven. There is no singular devil. There's not this, cartoon character, dude with the big horns who rules over all of hell. Swedenborg doesn't buy that. He says, no, God rules over heaven and hell. There are plenty of devils in hell, but there isn't, the opposite, to God in hell. No. Basically, God has to rule everything.
That makes so much more sense compared to, you hear those questions. Oh, why would God give the devil so much power? And isn't God really doing it if he knows everything? So that answers all of those questions. That's one thing I really appreciate about Swedenborg's work, is that like you said, there's common ground for an average person, a thinker, somebody that believes more maybe in science and physical evidence. And then when you take the Bible and then you say, hey, hold on, not everything in here is meant to be taken literally, right? And then that's where the beauty of his message, could resonate with most people and change, really make a good change in somebody's life when they really understand what they're reading, opposed to what somebody told them, how to interpret the word in some cases.
Well, and it changes your priority. Like, if you think about just like mainstream Christianity, put all the religions aside for a minute, like the Catholic Church, they're all about rituals, right? You got to say the right prayers, you got to do the rosaries, oh, you did something wrong, you got to confess. That's how they solve salvation, right? You got to do these things. The Protestant Church typically says, well, you've got to believe these things, because no matter how many good works you do, you can't earn heaven, right? You can never be perfect, which is true. But what neither of these things get right is resolving your heart, because I can go out this weekend and smoke a lot of drugs and have hookers and do all these things, right? Go back to my Catholic priest and say, oh, gee, I'm really sorry I stuffed up. And they'll absolve you. And then you can go out and do it again. And you just keep repeating this process. And you say, oh, but I'm going to go to heaven because, hey, look, I confess, I have given to the church, all these things. Like, well, does that really make sense? Does it make sense that a serial adulterer, goes to heaven even just because he did some rituals? Well, no, that's absurd. Same thing happens on the faith alone traditions, right? I've told the story plenty of times where I've met people where they think they can be as a jerk, they can abuse their wife, they can abuse their spouse, they can abuse their kids, but they say, hey, it's okay. I believe Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins, so I'm going to heaven. What? Does that make any sense? God's going to offer that person protection? You spent your whole life abusing your family, and I'm going to let you in? Oh, because you believe in me? No, you don't believe in me, you idiot. So, to me, the mainstream Christian ideas around what is salvation just don't make any sense. And Swedenborg's saying, look, if you want salvation, you have to be heaven. You have to accept heaven into yourself. You have to be the person who lives the way an angel would, right? And so, therefore, it opens up heaven not just to Christians, but it opens up heaven to everybody, because heaven is about what's in your heart, right? It's because you can be a jerk and say the right things. You can be a jerk inside and do the right things. But heaven's about the person who says, I actually want to be a person who likes doing the good things. I want to be the person who actually walks the walk and enjoys it. And that's the whole biblical narrative in a metaphor. It's that transition from who you were to who you can be. Jesus says you got to be born again, right? That's what he's talking about. Paul says we have to circumcise the heart. That's what he's talking about. It's not about a slavish kind of adherence to the rules. It's changing who you are inside. And that's the process I feel that I've gone through, is, becoming a different version of myself. So, yeah.
I like it.
Okay.
Tell us about your church. I'd never been to one like it. Tell us a little bit about it, like maybe the differences of a traditional church and your church.
Well, look, it's funny because it's sometimes hard for me to see the differences. like if you walk in and you participate in a service, a lot of the stuff's going to feel familiar, right? There's prayers, there's singing, there's somebody giving a sermon, right? That's your common ground. But what we do differently the denomination is called the New Church. And what we do differently is, because we see the Bible in this as an allegory for your life, we can talk to you about different stories in the scripture and show how it's a microcosm for your life. For example, a common one that I like, my favorite stories, is David and Goliath. Everybody knows the story, right? Little guy beats the big guy. Woohoo, right? That's a very basic message out of it. But what you can see with the story is that, well, how does David beat Goliath? Well, he beats him by using a slingshot. He's got a stone. It's not this kind of slingshot. It's the whip it and then let it go kind. And what David is showing is that he gets his stone from a brook. All right, a brook is running water. A stone is about truth. And so this stone has been smoothed over, decades, right? And what is it combating? Goliath comes on the scene and he's saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. You're going to be my slave. How many times do we have thoughts like that in our own head where you think, oh, I've got to do this. You're worthless. Michael, you're nothing. Nobody likes you. You're stupid. And by the way, you're bald too. You know what? It's like you get all these things and it's just, this negative stuff just pounds you. And what Swedenborg's telling us is that Goliath, he represents a life dominated by faith alone, where you say you believe in God, you say you're a religious person, you say you're spiritual, but you don't put it into action. And so it's just all this negative talk coming through, and you buy into it and you enslave the part of your life, David, that's actually trying to do the good actions. So when you come to our services, you're hearing how, oh no, that David and Goliath story isn't just a history story from 3,000 years ago. It's a story about what's going on in your own head. And the key to the story and the lesson you take away from it is what David has is mastery of the truth. He has mastery of it. You guys can ride a bike, but can you win the Tour de France? No. There's a difference between being able to do something and being a master of it. And David is a master of the truth. What has he mastered? Well, he's got 5 stones in his pouch. So he's not this guy who has his vast storehouse of knowledge necessarily, but he's a guy who's mastered the basics. And so he uses the truth. What's the truth? Like if I'm picking on Michael here, oh, you're stupid, you're ugly, nobody likes you. Well, what's the truth? He says, in your head, you're going, no, I am loved. My family loves me. My wife loves me. Francisco loves me, and, no, I may not be an underwear model, but you know what? I'm not, right. You start having, you've got to figure out what it is your stone. What's the thing that you can throw at Goliath and defeat him? What can make that negative talk shut up? And it's what the story's telling us is that it's not the obscure knowledge that wins the day. It's the mastery. It's the tried and true. It's the thing you pull out every time. It's I heard a phrase once. Oh, we have time, right? We have time.
Absolutely. Go crazy.
All right. So I heard this story years ago, and it really illustrates this point. I love this little story, and I can't remember if I have had one of my videos, but I love it. So It's a story about a kung fu master. He's been a student, and he wants to be a master. And he goes and he visits this Shaolin monk, and he's super excited. He's like, all right, I'm gonna learn the secret stuff. I'm gonna finally have access to all the secrets of the kung fu. And the master is there, and the student says, hey, master, can you teach me your secret kung fu? And the master says, well, I'd like to show you a punch. And the student's like, I know how to punch. Can you show, I want to know the good stuff. And I said, I'd really like to show you how to punch. And then they go back and forth. And finally, the master says, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you show me your punch? Let's start there. Let's show me what you got. And the guy's thinking, okay, I'll show my punch. I'll do it, and then we can get on to you'll see that I can do a good punch, and I'll move on. And so he does, he gets down, it's kung fu, pow, and the goal was to stop 1.5 inches in front of a candle flame. So he does, he stops right in front of it, perfect form, perfect technique. And the master says, well, that was very good. Let me show you my punch. So the master does his form, and he stops 3 feet from the candle flame, and the flame blows out.
My man.
And the student's like, yes, that's what I want. That's the stuff. And the master says, that's what I've been trying to tell you. I want to show you how to punch. You have to master the basics. Master them. He says the enemy is not afraid of the 10,000 punches you've practiced one time. But the enemy is deathly afraid of the one punch you've practiced 10,000 times. And that, to me, is the David and Goliath story. David has mastery. Goliath, he goes down with the smooth stone that's well-worn and rounded from years of use. And it's the same thing in our headspace, right? We win battles over the negative stuff on our head, not through the one obscure teaching we found, on a hike somewhere. We win the day over the stuff that we know will win. I know my wife loves me. I know God loves me. Dispense with all the other stupid stuff, right? And so when you come to our church services, this is where you started this long-winded answer I'm giving you. When you come to our church services, you're going to get stuff like that of showing you how these stories are real and about your life. And it's not just about a Jewish history book. That's the answer.
You got to give us an explanation, according to Swedenborg, of the Christmas story and how it relates to our life. In the, we all know how Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, and but is there a hidden meaning or something like that for the Christmas season that you can share with us, or a deeper meaning?
I don't know. It's top secret stuff.
The password is.
Well, it's just between the three of us here. Now, look. It's funny, yesterday I was working on the Christmas sermon I'm going to do for this week. And look, I think if you boil it down to its essence, well, what is the Christmas story? It's God being born into our life, right? He's born in the world, but, for us, it's about God coming into our life as well. And how does that happen? You can see that in the story, who receives God? Is it the kings and the elite of the ancient world? Nope. Right? He's born to some unknowns in a small town in a stable, right? It's all low stuff and not high society. And I think the message here is that, look, if you want God to come into your life, you have to be humble. He's not going to come into the parts of your life where you think you're doing great and you're all powerful, you have to have humility. You have to have some sort of like an innocence of a willingness to hear what God says. We all get sucked into, like, you're talking earlier about some skepticism, right? I'm never sure what to really do about religion and whatnot. And religion can only really come into a place where we have this kind of Christmas time awe. Like when you're a little kid and you approach a Christmas tree or Christmas Day, you're thinking, oh, wow, the impossible could happen, right? You might get that really cool G.I. Joe F-14 as a present. That would be so awesome. It's because as a little kid, it's beyond your own ability to procure that for yourself. Or there are more serious stories of little kids who say, oh, I wish mom and dad would stop fighting. Christmas is a time where you have this great wish for a better life, and it seems possible. And God can be born into those moments where you're willing to suspend your own cynicism, your own disbelief, and let him come in and do his work. The shepherds represent the heart side of us that says, yes, I'm willing to see the angels. The wise men are about the mind. The mind can see, hey, if I do these things, God can come in. And so the wise men represent these three gifts that are that the mind giving these gifts to God, and it grows from there. But it's Christmas time is about that innocence and giving space for the miraculous to happen. So there's an early Christmas sermon for you right there.
I like it.
Yeah, I find it maybe like, at least here in America, right, as like maybe the best humanity has to offer on any given time of the year, in any year, is like Christmas time. That's when people, they dig a little deeper, they're nicer, they give more, they help more. You think about it more. And it's, even though it's just for one day, you get the whole season of that. And I think that's a great thing.
Another thing, I'm sorry, I was going to change the topic. If you have something to add to Christmas, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when they're done fighting over the Black Friday deals, then yes, they start to turn good.
Yeah, like the meme that says the day before we're thankful for what we have, and then one day later we're trampling over somebody to get a TV.
That's right.
But after that,
you got it.
It's smooth sailing with the Christian America.
Yeah.
So this day and age, everything's on the internet. Do you stream your services every week?
Yeah, I sure do. We have a YouTube channel. I'm in the suburb of Hurstville. So HurstvilleNewChurch.com is our website. And I have a link to our YouTube live stream on there. It's probably the easiest way to get to it. We do that.
Awesome. And he also has the Lord I'm Trying YouTube page where he does the short videos, right? Those are awesome. I really appreciate those.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I used to have the streaming of the services and the videos on the same channel, but I've learned a bit how YouTube works. And so, like most of my videos, I'm trying to do a 10-minute-ish explanation of a particular Bible story or concept, whatever. And the church services, it's a different vibe, right? It's just a different way of doing things, and it's a longer format. And so what I'd find is people would watch one of the short videos, and then YouTube would then show them my church service. And the person who wants to watch my church service isn't really interested in the videos, and vice versa is what I find. So I had to split them into two channels. So I have the ones called Lord I'm Trying. The idea is, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to put the message out there. Whatever you do with this, God, that's up to you. But hey, I'm trying to do my thing. And
that's awesome.
The channels.
The future, everything's online. So the best way to reach the most people is the internet. So I'm glad you're on there. That's the perfect place to be. The
look, it's so true. Like if I have, say, 30 people in church, and let's say another 20, 30 watch the live stream, what's your effect there? Versus I can put something on YouTube and I'm getting, 10 to 20,000 views a month. That's way more than what I can do if I'm just working in my own church. So yeah, there's no question online is where it's at.
Absolutely. If you had to tell us your biggest takeaway from the Ivy Land New Church, what would it be?
From Ivy Land? Wow. Well, so I was an apprentice there. I worked there for about a year. And look, I think what I appreciated most was the guy I worked for. He was Reverend Tom Rose. And he was willing to let me go up there and sink or swim.
Nice.
He was willing to let me give it a go, try some things out, even though he thought some of my ideas were dumb, and some of them were. I appreciated that he was willing to just let, here you go, man, have a go.
What, for a live sermon, like on a Sunday?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm a fairly informal preacher, and Tom was a more formal, a bit more traditional. He's not like a full-on, high church guy, but he had his way of doing things, and he was good at it. And I was willing to like that story I just told you about the Kung Fu master. Like I would incorporate stuff like that into a sermon, or I would do something goofy with the kids as far as the kids talking. Like this one time I brought in all these props trying to do a Bible story, and then all of a sudden this kid got mud all over their dress, and I was just like, oh man. So I got some lessons. There, but
nice.
I think Ivy Land New Church was a great place to go and a great place to learn. But yeah, that was a long time ago.
Nice. Yeah, that's nice. Spiritual development classes. What does that pertain of?
Well, so what the home office in Philly, they put together these programs, basically usually 6 or 7 weeks, where usually we're following some biblical narrative, like say the creation story. So it's 7 days of creation. We do a day a week, and so the Sunday service would be about, say, day 1, the next week day 2, but then during the week we have a workbook and a small group that gets together and says, well, let's talk about this stuff. Let's make a real task that we're going to do each week to really put the spotlight on some of the work we should be doing, some of the inner work. And so these classes are designed to help us put the teachings into practice and not just let it go into our heads on a Sunday and forget about it once we walk out the church. All right, well, this week we're going to actually do this. And yeah, that's what that's about. So we run one once a year, usually once February rolls around. We run that between in the lead up to Easter. So it's really good. Yeah.
Well, what do you tell someone that wants to believe and find God and make that transition, but what deters them is the negative stigma, which is the unbelievable part of religion, which is, like, let's say, for example, Virgin Mary being pregnant.
Or conceiving Christ, or Christ dying and resurrecting.
Those things turn the average person off to not even open their mind to this. And I feel like that's always the hard part of helping people, because they just shut it off. I was one of them most of my life.
Yeah, look, I've encountered a lot of that here, actually. Australia is a bit more of a secular country than America was. And here we have a lot more Muslim people than I've ever encountered than in the U.S. And so some of these, and I encounter them because they go to the school with my kid, right? And some of the people have been super nice and being very upfront, saying the exact same things you do. Like, gee, hey, I appreciate Jesus as a guy, but boy, I have a hard time believing he was God. And it is a hard one to get past. You know, how do you believe that a virgin, you know, conceives a child? You know, oh, sure, she was a virgin, right? You know, oh yeah, she got pregnant, didn't want to admit she got knocked up, and so she says, "Oh, Dad, oh no, it was just the Holy Spirit," right? But the reason why I think Christians believe that she was a virgin isn't because she says it. You believe she's a virgin because of all the things that happen afterwards of what Jesus did. You go, oh, well, you know what? He did some pretty amazing things, you know, healed the sick, you know, blind could see, a guy who was dead for days is buried, pulled out of his tomb and walks again. So like you believe not because Mary makes the claim, you believe because of everything that happens afterwards. You know, when it comes to the idea about Jesus rising from the dead himself, I mean, yeah, sure, it's a big claim, isn't it? And yet, if you think about it, you know, you step back, look at the world. How big is Christianity in the world? I mean, like 20%, 40%, I don't know what the number is. You know, there's billions of people that believe this story.
Right. Over 2.3 billion. I just looked it up.
Yeah. So you have 2.3 billion, it's what, 8 billion population of the world, something like that?
Yeah, a little over 8 billion.
So you got, you know, a little more than, you know, 25, 30% believe. And where does this story come from? It comes from this tiny, stupid little place in the world, you know, where there's nothing. You know, Israel, Jerusalem was a nothing place of the world 2,000 years ago. And it spreads, you know, throughout the Greek and Roman empires. And it just, like, to me, this story doesn't spread like this if it's not real. You know, to me, there's gods behind it, you know, because how else can it escape its own little hometown if there's not some bigger force behind it?
And there was multiple people claiming to be the Messiah back then, all the time.
Oh, look, you get them today. There's a great book called The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. And it's basically these different people who claim to be Christ, and they're in mental hospitals. So, yeah. The idea of the book was that this therapist was going to put these three Christs in the same room together, so they would come to the conclusion that, wait a second, we can't all be Christ.
Oh,
how you know?
that's a good one.
It would force them out of their delusion.
That's awesome.
That's great, right there.
3 patients helped themselves. helped each other.
You got it.
I like it.
And it worked pretty well, actually. But, yeah, so Jesus' story has legs of him being Christ because of what he did. And there are people today who still have stories of miracles. And I tell you, you know, one of the coolest things about my job, absolutely dead serious here, coolest thing about my job is that because I'm a pastor, people will tell me the stories of their life that they're too embarrassed and afraid to tell anybody else because of the stigma attached to it. People who have had miraculous healings, people who have had visions, people who have, it's unbelievable the stuff they tell me. And it just reminds me that those miracles weren't just 2,000 years ago. Those miracles are still happening today. And that's, again, why Christianity still keeps going. And it's the hard part is what you're saying is that people are skeptical. Oh, you know, you don't want to be looking stupid, right? You know, we have so much pride. Oh, I don't want to be dumb and believe in this stuff. So we refuse to believe. And we say, oh, well, when I'll believe when I see it. But that's not the way spirituality works. It's the other way around. When you believe, then you'll see. You know, God doesn't interfere with our development. And one of the interesting teachings of Swedenborg that I haven't found anywhere else, is that God is very much protective of us from becoming worse than we already are. He would rather put like a stop loss, a floor on your degeneration. It's more important to do that than to accelerate your progression. You see? And most of the time we think about, it's all important to become better. And God's like, well, yeah, that's really good. I want you to become better, but it's more important that you not become worse.
I like that.
He told me that one time. When I asked you for advice one time, he told me, look, a step back isn't a problem as long as it's not 2 or 3 steps back, every step forward.
And so like, God doesn't have miracles become so open and manifest, because if he were to show some of these things publicly, you'd have the hardened disbelievers become even more hardened in their disbelief, putting them in a worse spiritual state than they would have been if they'd never seen it in the first place. So, like, again, weird stories I get is a lot of times a spouse will pass away, right? A couple's been married 50 years, one spouse dies, and then that departed spouse will somehow communicate back to the one that's living. And I had a friend, his spouse passed away. He was probably in his 50s, I guess. And he was really distraught because his wife of 25 years or whatever it was never showed up, never visited him, no dreams, no visions, no signs, nothing. 2 years later, he meets somebody else, and he gets remarried.
Oh, she popped up.
And you know what I said to him? I said, well, look, could you have been remarried? Could you have married this woman who's given you so much happiness if you still thought that wife number one was waiting for you in the afterlife, and she'd given you something to say that I'm still here and, I love you more than anything else in the world? To me, she did a favor by staying silent and letting him move forward with his life. It's not that she didn't care. She cared so much as to stop herself from communicating. Now, of course, I could be completely wrong in my analysis, but that's how I see it. And, to me...
That's beautiful,
It sounds like a romantic movie. It sounds nice.
Yeah.
It's a good way of looking at it.
You let him be free, like you said before. He wouldn't be able to make that decision. He'll be handicapped by the love for her. So, and that gave him the freedom.
I like it. Do you what do you think your relation with psychedelics and spirituality are?
Oh no, Michael, what did you tell him?
Oh man, no, I didn't. My mouth is sealed, bro. I'm like a priest or a lawyer.
Oh my gosh. My relationship with psychedelics. Oh, that's a tough one. You're trying to get me excommunicated from the church, I think.
Well, how about this question? Well, I never said anything. I never heard of anything, to be honest.
I didn't ask anything specific with you. I said in general, the relation, because I've tried many psychedelics, and the most powerful one on earth is 5-MeO-DMT that comes from the toad. That one, they call it the God molecule. So something like that, I would love to know your opinion. And the main reason I ask you is because earlier in this podcast, when I brought up Swedenborg having hallucinations, I was wrong's hallucinations. It was he had some type of way of reaching the spiritual world or something like that, right?
Hey, kids, that's some white boy shit. No offense.
Hey.
No offense, man. But if you stick to the other stuff, you know what I mean? I recommend, have a drink here, maybe a smoke there. That's where the cap, in my estimation.
To me, those are two different things.
Unless you're like up north and you have no access to anything, you're stuck with just this crazy type of stuff. No offense to you, man.
It's not crazy stuff at all.
But
please, I would love to hear your side of this.
So,
can people reach a spiritual state through psychedelics?
So I think psychedelics have a lot to offer. I really do. About a year and a half ago, I think it was, maybe 2.5 years ago, it was, in the last couple of years, I wrote some stuff about it in my church newsletter because there's a lot of information coming out the last few years about the usefulness of psychedelics in spiritual growth. And so I went and studied quite a bit about it. And what I didn't reveal to my readers is that, well, I've actually done ayahuasca.
Woo! Oh, man.
Yeah, I've done that a few times. And
Aaron
I've done
Rodgers
5-MeO-DMT.
just did that.
I've listened to a lot of stories and accounts of it. I honestly don't feel the need to do it. You know, when I hate this sounds like a shameless plug.
I'll tell you
but
why.
like, honestly, truly, when I read the different stories of what these people come back with, they're teaching me the stuff that I've read in Swedenborg already. You're right. They call it the God molecule, and what I found interested in learning about it is that it's not called the God molecule because you feel like God. It's the God molecule because you kind of understand things from God's perspective. You understand God himself better. And it's, you know, a lot of people come back with this perspective of, oh, God's much bigger than my little Baptist church. God's the God of everything. And it's like, whoa. And they come back with a realization that, oh, you know what? This system all makes sense. I understand why things go the way they do now. And it's a big shift in perspective, which I think really does align with what Swedenborg teaches. So never had that experience on that 5-MeO-DMT, but I have. I can see where some people would find it useful. Yeah.
I understand everything you said clearly. I've experienced 5-MeO-DMT. I have not experienced ayahuasca. I want to, but just like you said, where you have no need to even want 5-MeO-DMT, I understand it, because if you don't need it, if you don't want it, if you're not drawn to it, it's just not meant to be. And you already experienced it, and you know what it is, and by your reading and by your experiences, you know what it is. But the day I did experienced 5-MeO-DMT, that was the day I started. That's the day my mind opened to spirituality. That day, before that day, I never believed in anything. Zero.
So you know, there's the regular DMT. I don't know, it's regular DMT, and there was a book I read in all this study, and this guy was he was out, I think, in Arizona. He was a university doctor, and he's doing a whole study about DMT and the effects on people. And he was trying to figure out, like, what's the magic dosage, right? And he found that there's a threshold, like, at a certain amount of DMT, you can't deny the existence of God anymore. You know, you can take small amounts of it and say, it's a hallucination or whatever. But you get to a certain point, and even the most hardened people were like, yeah, no, God's real. God,
100%. 100%.
Yeah?
It's undeniable.
Wow. Yeah, but let me ask you a question, I guess, in relationship to this subject. The people that say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Isn't religion, you know, like in a vacuum, the guide to spirituality?
Yeah, look, yes, you know, religion is supposed to be that. And I think when people say I'm spiritual, not religious, they're trying to distance themselves from the insane parts of religion that have been perpetrated out there. They're trying to say, you know what, I don't believe that XYZ ritual is the key to salvation, and everybody else who doesn't do this ritual goes to hell. You know, they're trying to give them space from the corruptions that happen within the organizations, which is an unfortunate reality. You know, that's yeah. So,
by the way, about the like magic mushrooms, I heard and read about that they helped a lot of people get off of cigarettes, lose weight, change their mood, depression. The only thing I would fear with that stuff is becoming dependent on it, and not using it as like a boost for a change, for their own change, from their own heart, in their own mind.
I never heard of anybody becoming dependent on it. I could be wrong, of course, but people do use it as microdosing instead of depression medicine, instead of anxiety medication that they would take every day. I'd say that's not being dependent on it, but that's better than taking a chemical that's been made.
Wrong choice of words. I meant I would say the change. For it to really be a change, it would spark something in you. And then you'll take it and run with it. You would run with it. Not, I need this. Like, not dependent like you smoke cigarettes and now the nicotine is calling and you have to smoke.
Never.
No, I'm saying like, if I'm going to continue to be good, I need this. And then dependent on it in that sense.
No, I'm totally with you. I think that I'm agreeing with you 100%. But it's, to me, those kind of medicines are a tool in the toolbox. It's, hey, I'm in this place. I need a reset, right? You're in a bad neighborhood. I need to get out of here. Once you get out of there, it's your job to not go back to the bad neighborhood, right? You know, you still have to maintain and act the right ways. But sometimes it's like, you're praying, come on, God, get me out of here. And the plant medicines can be useful for that. Look, because I went to a couple of those ayahuasca meditations, I encountered a lot of people and their stories, and I have huge amount of respect because the people that go there, they are looking, they're putting in the work. They're in need of something. You guys haven't done ayahuasca, right?
No, I want to, but I'm waiting for it to just happen naturally. It will. Look,
it is not fun. Point blank, it is not fun. You would not do this to get high, right?
Of course.
This is not a pleasant experience. So you don't have to worry about getting dependent on ayahuasca because it's just too miserable. But that's why I think it's so good, because people sit there and go, I am in a desperate place. I need something to help me out of this. And I'm willing to go through this miserable process to do it. I still think that you got to have God in your life. You got to have that higher power. But you still have tools available to you to help you get out of a bad spot. And I mean, I don't know how much you want to go down this rabbit hole of psychedelics, but
we could be here for hours. We could be here for hours. So let's definitely cut that off, because we could be here for hours. The only thing I want to point out from what you said, which I relate to 100%, is the word reset. That's what it does for you. It resets you.
That's a nice adjective.
It's beautiful. Right? We're cutting short on the Zoom, so let's just end it. And if you could please let the people know where they could find you, and if you have any last advice you'd like to give my viewers.
Yeah, well, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I use the channel Lord I'm Trying. It's usually often easier to find me by my name, I think. Todd Beiswenger, Beiswenger, Todd Beiswenger. And you can find me on my church webpage, HurstvilleNewChurch.com. Any of those ways you can reach me. My big advice, really, the big takeaway is, read the Bible. I really believe that if you approach it humbly, like you're looking for that help, you're looking for that reset, you don't need the psychedelics. The Word of God is there to be that connection between heaven and hell. And look, I really believe that the spiritual realm is real, and that, hell's, negative thought, hell, whatever you want to call it, it's pushing on us, right? These thoughts aren't chemicals. They're coming from somewhere. And what the scripture does is it brings us in our connection to God, and that evil doesn't want to be around goodness, right? The way, you turn on the light and the cockroaches run away, it's the same deal. You connect to God and all the cockroaches of your mind go away. So that's my big advice, is just approach God, do it humbly, but do it regularly. Don't make it the thing you do once a year. Make it a daily part of your life. Like, you drink a cup of water, you eat some food, make it part of your routine, because it's those routines, it's those daily things that make it part of you. And as you do those things, I think you'll see that your mind becomes a much better place. So that would be my pitch for people. If you do that, I'm very confident that results will come about. So
thank you very much for those words. Beautifully said. You have any last words, Mike?
No, but I want to thank you. Thank you for being on, and I would really look forward to a part 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I want one whole episode on psychedelics.
Look, what would make perhaps a good second one is all the weird stories, because I've got piles of stories that people have told me over the years.
We didn't even get into aliens and Swedenborg's book on that.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah, let's definitely dive deep.
Yeah, so hopefully by the time, or maybe when you said you're coming to Philly next year, right? So maybe we can do it in person. That would be nice.
That'd be great. We could link up somewhere in the middle, maybe.
Yeah. I should be there end of June.
Awesome. Let's do it. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Rev.
It's been a pleasure, fellas.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. Continue the videos. We love them. And we'll share the link below.
Absolutely.
All right, somewhere down there.
Talk about it with Franjez. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Peace and love.
Mike and Muqattash. Peace, love, and wisdom, right?
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.